So the continuation of session 1. So let us understand few of the consequences on the grad phi part of it. So d phi is grad phi dot dr vector. Now we know what is dr vector is. Dr vector is what? Dx I cap plus dy j cap plus dz k cap. Now let us solve for this grad phi dot dr vector, and the resultant we have to get it as d phi vector. So to solve that, what is that? Let us take the RHS. LHS is equal to RHS. Let us take the RHS and show that it is equal to my LHS. So grad phi dot dr vector will be what? Grad phi I know. What is that? D phi by dx I cap plus d phi by dy j cap plus d phi by dz k cap. Dot, what do we have? Dx I cap plus dy j cap plus dz k cap. So the dot product of these two, what I am going to get is, it is not d phi, it is grad. So dou phi by dou x, dou phi by dou y, dou phi by dou x, and dou phi by dou z. So what do I am going to get? Dou phi by dou x into dx, I cap dot I cap becomes 1, whereas I cap with all the other terms will be 0. We know that the dot product of the ijk. So now what will be this? Dou phi by dou y into dy plus dou phi by dou z into dz. So we know grad phi dot dr vector will be equal to, this is the total derivative, therefore it is nothing but my d phi, and hence we were able to prove the first consequence. Now let's move on to the second consequence. So let's understand the second consequence. The necessary and sufficient condition for a scalar point function, this scalar point function y of x, y, z, to be a constant. If it is a constant, then its grad phi will automatically be 0. So we need to prove this. So let's prove this part. So let's start proving this. It is a constant. So let us consider phi of x, y, z is equal to some constant c. So if it is a constant, what will be the partial derivative with respect to each variable? It will be 0. Dou phi by dou x is 0. Dou phi by dou y is 0. Similarly, dou phi by dou z is also 0. Now let me substitute in the grad function. So I cap plus j cap plus k cap. So that will be equal to 0 because each term is 0. So the total, but what do we know? This is the grad phi, and hence we are getting it as 0. Conversely, because here they are asking us to prove necessary and sufficient conditions. So conversely, what are we getting? Conversely, let me take, here we took it as phi is equal to c. Now let me take grad phi is c. So if grad phi is 0, I have to prove that it is equal to c. So necessary and sufficient condition. So it will be dou phi by dou x I cap plus dou phi by dou y j cap plus dou phi by dou z k cap is equal to 0. If all the terms are equal to 0, each term must be equal to 0. Therefore, dou phi by dou x is 0, dou phi by dou y is 0, and dou phi by dou z is also equal to 0. That means each term is 0, means phi is independent of x, y, z. Phi is independent of x, y, and z. So phi is independent of x, y, z, and therefore phi is equal to constant c. So we are able to prove this. The second consequence is done. Now let's move on to the third consequence. Third consequence. What is that? Prove that grad of c into phi is equal to c dot grad phi, where we know that c is a constant, and phi is a scalar point function. C is a constant and phi is a scalar point function. So what you have to do, you have to just take grad of C phi and expand this by the gradient function. So what do I get? I cap dou by dou x of C phi plus j cap dou by dou y of C phi plus k cap dou by dou z of C phi. So since C is a constant, I'll take it out. So I have I cap dou phi by dou x plus j cap dou phi by dou y plus k cap dou phi by dou z. So this is nothing but C into grad phi. So we are able to prove this third consequence. Similarly, I would like all of you to solve some of the other 4 consequences I will give you. So all of you solve for this. That is, prove that grad of phi plus or minus psi is grad phi plus or minus grad psi. If you don't get, I will do it once again. That's not a problem, but you try to solve this, okay? Then the next 5th consequence will be grad of phi of psi. Here it is plus or minus, addition and subtraction. You're going to, and here it's a product rule. So it is phi into grad psi plus psi into grad phi. So try to solve this. Next consequence will be quotient rule. That is, grad of phi by psi will be equal to 1 by psi square psi into grad phi minus phi into grad psi. The 7th one will be, you're going to prove that if R vector is the position vector of the point P of x, y, z, and phi is a function of R where R is equal to modulus of R vector, then grad of phi of R will be 1 by R into d phi by dr. One by R into d phi by dr